people tried Google Nose yesterday.
Hey, that was pretty cool. I posted that on my Facebook.
Now, did you watch any of the YouTube stuff?
Google what?
Nose. They got a new product.
Right.
It was Google Nose Beta. So the YouTube one, did you see that?
No, I didn't get a chance to.
They announced that they're, after 7 years, they have now accepted all the entries into the video contest, and they'll be shutting down as of April 1st. And they will begin judging all the videos that have been submitted for the contest.
Submitted to what contest?
And that they will announce the winner in 10 years. Because they have to go through all the videos.
Well, I got to vote for Henry the Cat.
Yeah. So, yesterday they started a live stream of them reading off the video names. Like they had a podium and stacks of cards and they had somebody up there like reading the names. I guess it was 12 hours long.
Okay, let me back up. I obviously missed something on this.
They said YouTube was a video submission site for a contest of $500.
$500.
I think it was $500.
Is it $500 of money then or $500 of money now? Because I mean,
then,
inflation.
Yeah,
inflation may have
that would have been
it a little.
Clever April Fool's prank to watch.
Yep.
Oh, although I thought the Minecraft April Fool's prank was funny.
Oh, I didn't see
Floating animals.
I tried to stay off the internet most yesterday. A lot of the stuff I told you about, I heard about Sunday night because people on the other side of the world got to see it first. And they were spoiling it. So, good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome to the Omaha Linux Users Group, April 2013. Woo! I am John Larson. I am a systems engineer here in this wonderful building at the AIM Institute.
That's killing our presentation.
That's killing the presentation to signal levels. So tonight, Kelly and Sam are going to do amateur radio in Linux. And before that, we've got a few things. So, a little bit of news. GNOME 3.8 is out. So is Fallback. It is no longer available. It is now called Classic Mode, which means it's in to stay. Previously, they announced that Fallback would be disappearing. So now what they do is they include several extensions that give you a GNOME 2 look, all the GNOME 3 libraries. So if you made several people happy, Wooby is going away in the next version of Ubuntu.
What's Wooby?
Yeah.
Wooby allowed you to install Ubuntu inside of Windows.
Oh.
It was the installer, right? Yeah.
Something like that.
Fedora and Arch have both announced that they're going to switch to MariaDB away from MySQL. So yes, round of applause. It is binary and command compatible. You can drop in. All the commands are exactly the same, so it's not going to be really a big issue. Although there should be some improvements. OpenSUSE 12.3 is out. Hey! So is CentOS 6.4.
Woo!
If you have any of the previous 6 versions, you can upgrade just by doing the online click.
I'll have to upgrade my OpenSUSE one to see if rubber printing works.
What printing?
Brother printing for
Oh.
brother.
Don't they have their own RPM?
I have spent hours on my daughter's laptop and my other laptop trying to get it. It just arbitrarily drops letters. All just random letters.
So, what was I going to say? On my Epson, I found an RPM for the MX400. You can only get it from Japan, but it enables all the scanning features.
So you randomly accepted an RPM from somewhere in Japan?
It was from Epson's website, Epson Japan. It was, they had English on the page.
And would you take it from Epson.ru?
No. But I've used it before and it works great. I mean, it enables all the scanning functions. You use Simple Scan or GNOME and it requires it and all that jazz. So,
Does it work with the Perl same library? Or?
maybe. I think it should. does all the same stuff.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's all I have on the news. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What about Infotech?
Oh yes, Infotech's coming
What
up
is
this
that?
month. It is our premier information technology conference here at the Ames Institute. So, it's the 16th and 17th. We've got a magician, Ben Vu from Skyview. He's a local guy, Battle Bears. And Marco Tempest is the magician. And Jeremy Gushde from trendhunter.com. I got an email from somebody asking me to unblock trendhunter.com from the guest network the other day. Apparently it's been flagged as lingerie bikini.
Woo!
So,
What was that again?
yeah, trendhunter.com. Give it a try. It won't work. So in the last week, I have gotten 2 phone calls to attend conferences in Omaha. IBM is doing one on flash storage on the 16th. Intel is doing one on the 17th. I said, well, each one of these, I said, well, I'm already attending the Midwest's premier information technology conference. Well, is there anybody else in your company that could go? I said, no. It's an all-hands meeting, and we're not going to be able to go anywhere else.
Wait,
I don't
is
think we
IBM
would.
a sponsor though?
They are a sponsor.
Did you even mention that? What?
I should have, but it was just a calling agency. But the app is out today for iOS and Android.
Or
Yes.
I have to look.
Yep, I tried it out earlier today. Someone had posted some really huge URLs on the staff blog, so I made a QR code and shortened it. We'll see how that works. Any questions this month? Things that they're working on, things that they're curious about.
Anybody interested in a laptop?
What kind of laptop?
It's a gateway.
How much?
Oh, we're going back.
It's a nice little laptop. Core 2 Duo, 4 gig of RAM,
How much?
150.
Oh no, they don't have that.
15 inch, 14 inch. 14 inch.
Believe
Help
me.
out here.
You don't want to keep getting. When you try to get rid of them, it's terrible.
You gotta clear a path to this room right now. So.
Yeah, you know what? That's when you take them out for target practice.
Speaking of which, something I didn't have on the news here today. On The Verge, I saw an article about a new high-powered rifle that has Linux power. Computer-assisted sighting. Sweet. Sub-inch accuracy at 1,000 yards.
Wow, it's like 14 grand, isn't it?
It's 17 grand.
17 grand.
Now, with
Gosh,
the
you
gun,
had that laying around.
the gun is about 5 to 7. So all told, it's around 22 grand.
5 to 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of my coworkers is president of the Nebraska Sporting Clays. He says that they're about $6 to $7 per round to fire from the gun.
Oh, I guess.
It's almost the price of 22s now.
Yes.
Probably a 50 cal. Right?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's at
if it's a
.338.
Really?
It's its own. They do all their own ammunition and stuff like that. It's all special stuff.
anything that.
I think it's based on that 338 Lapua
big.
round. That's
It's pretty. It was an interesting. It was on Ars Technica as well. They had an article about it.
Hey, I searched iOS or searched the app.
AIM events.
Yeah, it's got its own iPad app or something like that.
The gun. Oh, I haven't read the whole article. I just passed it off to the gun guy.
It's got its own iPad app. Or, which.
And it's Linux. I mean, there you go. But you know, people race for what they think is the most popular. So. I don't have much after that. You have one other thing? May. Anyone want to speak in May? Not. I guess it'll be me. What should I talk about? System D again? Maybe more System D than last time? System D's changed. Got a few new features. Maybe I should do it. Ubuntu is now incorporating the login D portion of System D into their development. The Upstart developer has left Canonical, and some Wayland people have left too.
Oh. So.
It's kind of hard to stay there if you're a Wayland guy.
Yeah. They tried to do a fork this last week, and there was not recognized officially officially, and there's just a lot of chaos going on right now. I really feel for some of those folks. But I guess there is an official GNOME Ubuntu distribution, so you don't have to use the Ubuntu interface. All right. See what happens in May. Keep your eyes peeled. All right, guys.
You're up, Sam.
You're up. Oh.
Okay.
That was a
Whoa.
sound, man.
I wonder if I can.
Let's see if I can get
Don't
that.
forget to speak loud.
I'll try. Well, let's see. Do I have to zoom?
Oh, you had a clicker.
No, I don't.
I can be
Is
your.
that too
I'll be
small?
your clicker if you want.
Is that too small?
I got my glasses, I can read that just
Like-
fine.
Is it just spacebar?
Spacebar arrow either way. Okay, well, let's see. We're talking about ham radio and free software. Well, let's see. We'll cover free software first. I'm not gonna go in. I'm not gonna do like Richard Stallman, go into a huge spiel. Oh,
Why not?
We'd be here for 3 hours. But it gives for a user 4 essential freedoms: the freedom to run the program for whatever purpose, the freedom to study how the program works and change it so it does your computing as you wish. And you have to be able to access the source code to do that. It gives you the freedom to redistribute copies so you can help others, and gives you the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions to others. That way you can give the whole community a chance to benefit. I'm sure you can all read that. And then of course ham radio or amateur radio is the use of certain frequencies to exchange non-commercial messages for contests, socialization, emergency communications, and the like. CW or continuous wave is Morse code. It's a series of dots and dashes used to represent different characters. It's one of the most efficient. Well,
It's like the oldest
yeah, the oldest.
form of communication.
And isn't it like the most reliable? It is. And the most reliable form of radio communication. And then there's PSK31, binary fission key at 31 baud. And I'll let you explain that.
It's 31 baud because when your average person types like me, I don't type any faster than 31 characters a minute, you know. So 31 baud works for keyboard to keyboard communication. That's why it's set there. And also for PSK31, the bandwidth. Unfortunately, we're not getting anything because of the noise in here. The bandwidth is very small, and inside the typical radio passband of about 0.5 or 500 hertz to about 2500 hertz, you can get a couple dozen signals in there. Whereas if you packed more than 2 or 3 CW signals in that same space, you would have a hard time deciphering them. And one voice or sideband signal takes up the whole space. So with the PSK, you can pack a bunch of signals into one small area. Radio teletype is like one of the first, goes back to the TTY, big giant clicker things and stuff. It's not used a whole lot anymore. Ham radio guys still do it. Sideband is voice. If you listen to an AM radio station, there's 2 sidebands on that, the upper, lower, and then there's the carrier in the center. So on ham radio, you take one of those sidebands, put all your power into that, and you get rid of the second sideband and the carrier. So you punch more power into your signal. And we just talked about AM, it's both sidebands and the carrier. It's sort of the offset. Your radio needs to listen to one or the other.
And speaking of RTTY,
There's lots of different forms of digital type communications in there.
there's PAC and what all does Splidgy do? I don't know. RTTY. Speaking of RTTY, go ahead and go to the next slide.
Before we go on, I was thinking about CW and the fact that it almost is digital, even though it's an analog
It is,
medium, because
it
it's
is,
either on
yeah.
or off.
Exactly, because you're right, it's either on or off, and it's based on the character length, A dot, there's a standard for Morse code. A dot is a certain number of units wide. A dash is a certain number of units wide. A dash is supposed to be 3 times a dot. The intercharacter space between a dot and a dash in the same letter is supposed to be the same width as a dot. The intercharacter space between 2 letters is supposed to be like twice the dash. but it's one of the oldest, I mean, that's back when they were doing, Morse code on the telegraphs on wires. That system, went further into amateur radio when they started using spark gap, where you started to do, started to turn on and off the spark, and that would transmit a real broadband radio signal, and you could pick it up somewhere else.
And speaking of RTTY, the Makery recently, it's not RTTY, but Makery recently acquired an old teletype. I'm still wondering if someone's ever going to hook that up to the radio. It works. Apparently they've been playing Zork on it.
Sweet.
And watching Twitter feeds.
Oh.
Next slide.
Software, well, we'll be using a few pieces of software. There's Fliggy, Clark, and G-Rig. Fliggy, it's a piece of software. It's got several what are known as CAT, or computer-aided transmission backends, including one of the more well-known Hamlib. Flark, it's part of the Fliggy suite. It's a radio logging system, and that's actually done using XML RPC between the two, which is kind of cool. And then there's G-Rig. It's just an interface GUI, and it just uses Hamlib. But where Fliggy does anything and everything, Grig, basically, it's like sitting right in front of this and controlling it all through there. Of course, there are many other pieces of software, and I know Aaron last month mentioned Debian is a big distro for radio people. It has a large selection. Sadly, Fedora doesn't have as much of a selection, but I do prefer Fedora, so that's what we're using. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Occupied's configuration of applications, it's not always the most pleasant, but with these, it's actually rather easy. All you have to make sure to do is know what model of radio you have, a few other pieces of information such as your sound card, and what serial, what TTY your radio is connected to on your computer. Unfortunately, that was kind of annoying. At first, I was trying to run Fliggy on this machine right here, just as a normal user, and Fliggy really wasn't liking it. Hamlib just wouldn't connect. After a while, I figured out, oh great, it's permissions. Not wanting to have to change permissions because it can be just a pain. I just decided to start running it as root, which is what we end up having to do. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Let's see. Although it says demo time,
Do that at the end, maybe something will come up.
yeah, we do have a few other things to run through, so and they're not on there all.
He had to incorporate my stuff into his, and we didn't want to mix them together.
No, all his stuff was on PowerPoint.
I converted it to PDF for you.
Yeah, I know, but
Don't argue, just get it done.
let's see. We're gonna run through his PDF presentation if I can get it up.
That's not the first slide, is it?
Yeah, it is.
All right.
I may be able to get full screen.
Where's the slide with the hand bands?
That's not a slide. I can get that down.
That's the first one up. Then you can go to that one. It doesn't have to.
Oh.
I'm guessing it's down under hand presentation center. There we go. Now make that full screen.
Okay.
All right. Amateur radio started back before the FCC ever came to exist. It started with the first guys playing around with basically coils and Tesla machine type stuff, and the little spark going across. Whenever that spark goes across, it makes a radio noise. So at first, amateur radio, was sort of the pioneer to what we would call commercial radio now, and business band, all that kind of stuff. Well, somewhere along the line, they decided, hey, we have to control this. say, okay, you guys can use these bands, this, this for this. And the radio spectrum seemed to increase, because at first it was very tough to get like beyond the 1.8, 3.5, where's the next one? 7 megahertz kind of range. The original ham bands were 160 meters, 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters, and 10 meters long. So that the frequency equates to wavelength of the radio signal. So what the FCC did, or whoever the government agency did, they decided, hey, we gotta coordinate this, and amateur radio at that time played a significant part in emergency communications. So they said we gotta block off a chunk of radio spectrum for these guys, for them to use, and we recognize that, hey, we can't limit you to just one spot, because radio propagation doesn't work that way. So, somewhere along the way, they came up with the idea to make all these bands. Well, the bands, if you look, are basically harmonically related, meaning, twice this one is this one, or excuse me, this one, twice this one is this one. Then 40 meters goes to 20, and this is a harmonic of 7. Then 10 meters down here is a harmonic of 14, or 7, or 80, whichever. And then, we have VHF up there, which originally, back in the early radio days, basically didn't, for radio purposes, didn't exist. Same thing, with starting from 6 to 70 centimeters, and down. And then in the fine print, amateur radio's got chunks of the spectrum at 2.3 gigs, 3.3, 5.6, and we also have everything over 300 gigahertz. But that's kind of tough to work. What happens on the amateur radio bands is the sunspot cycle and the time of day, how the atmosphere is charged. That makes a difference on how the signals bounce off the atmosphere and where they bounce, and that makes a difference on how far you can talk. If everything's right, you talk more than halfway around the world, and you usually go one hop beyond, because if you go more than one hop beyond the halfway around the world, you would go around the other direction. So you will go, they call it long path, because from here, this point on Earth to somewhere in, say, Australia, there's 2 ways to get there. One's the direct path, one's the long path. So it works that way. Most of the time you get them on the direct path, not the long path. Go ahead and flip this. This is just the idea to show you where we have chunks. All right. A while back, I spent a year in Qatar. Before I went, I thought, hey, maybe I could play on the radio while I'm there. Have something to do besides work 12-hour shifts. So I got with the guys in Qatar, the counterpart to the American Radio Relay League, which would be the Qatar Amateur Radio Society, and I got them to issue me a license for Qatar. So that way I can play with my radios from my, at first, tent when I was in the Middle East and Qatar, to later these trailer-like things. And got hooked up on that. They said I was good to go, and go from there. Next slide, Sammy. So those are the periods that I got to operate. First one was for just under a year. It took me some time to get settled into my new job. And then the next ones were it depended, 4 months, 2 months, 3 months kind of thing. And originally I had a radio different from this one. I still have. Then I had the next one, which is the little brother to this radio, and I sold it to one of these guys, the A71BX over there. And before I went on leave, and then I bought this one on when I was back on leave, and took that back with me, because the way the exchange rate worked, I came out ahead, and they didn't seem to care. So I met these guys. This guy here, Sheikh Abdul Rahman, he's a religious leader kind of guy, private pilot, and he would always come down to meet me at the Amateur Radio Society. Ali was kind of like my best friend there, for the Qatari guys. And he would come down and meet me. We would go all over the place in the country. Same thing with A71EM, that's Juma. And then A71EZ, I only met him a couple times, but he was the first guy in Qatar that I talked to on my radio. It just so happened to be, it's like, hey, this guy's local. So there, my first trip, I made about 1,200 contacts, in the year. So you think, it's a lot. But my second trip, first trip was almost a year. The second trip, I actually had more time on my hands. And so that 4-month period, I ended up making 1,300 contacts. Most of these were Morse code, because it was just easier than doing voice or PSK. And then the third trip, I made a few, and about 600 on the fourth trip. And like it says, 80% were CW, 15 PSK, some sideband. Sideband radio conditions had to be good, low noise conditions. The skip and stuff had to work out. I worked 118 DXCC entries or entities. An entity is like a country, except that we call Alaska an entity because it's geographically separated from the United States. And part of the idea is the American Radio Relay League has an award for working countries. It's just a paper thing, and you don't get anything except a piece of paper. But I got 118 all continents, including Antarctica, 25 U.S. stations. That kind of showed it was actually tough to get the U.S.
From that antenna.
From this antenna.
All that.
Yep.
Well, didn't you have another antenna?
I had another antenna that was similar to this. The other antenna was a fixed antenna. This one's adjustable, but it was basically the same kind of thing. Worked Alaska, worked Hawaii, and I think I didn't really get the central part of the U.S. except for like one or two. Mostly I got the East Coast and the Gulf states, a few U.S. Stations that I did get. I don't think I really got the West Coast either. Alaska from Qatar is the short path is across China and Russia to Alaska, so it's actually a lot closer. All right, next one, Sam. So we were talking about the computer side of things. The software talks to the radio, and they talk back and forth. And when you enter, when you say enter on your computer, if you're working like PSK, it captures the call sign, enters it in, puts the time in, puts the frequency in. If you're on CW, you got to type that call sign in.
Well,
that you work.
Fliggy actually,
Well,
no matter.
Fliggy will decode CW, and then you just click on the call sign that you work.
Gotta love reg X.
And it'll log for you the date, time, frequency, and mode. And then there's a program out there, EQSL is an independent ham radio place that their idea is we want to, we're starting our own award system separate from the ARRL, and we're going to confirm contacts. So they put in, you send to them your list of who you talk to. The other guy sends their list, and if they get a contact, then they call that a QSL or a confirmed contact. So now you get credit for that country. And the ARRL has something similar called the Logbook of the World. ARRL was kind of late coming in with the electronic QSLs. And then I got 72 countries confirmed with paper. And like total, between these two, or these three types, it's nine countries short of getting the 100 countries confirmed. I worked more than 100, but I didn't get them confirmed.
So with the paper, it was essentially like postcards.
Postcards, yeah. These are copies of the front of my QSL cards. I had two different ones because this was the first one. I ran through the first 1,000 on my very first trip out there. The second one, I ran through all of those, and they made a tiny mistake on placing who these call signs were. So I actually had an extra 1,000. So pretty much by the time I was done with those 3 trips or 4 trips, I used all my, it ended up being 3,000 QSL cards. I had like 50 left kind of thing. But that, you send that, and on the back side has the contact details, like date, frequency, time, mode, call, that kind of thing. Next slide, Cindy. So, like I said, I got to meet some of these guys. These are some of their QSL cards. This is the Amateur Radio Society station. I met this guy. I met Juma. This is Ali. This one was, they had a contest. I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2006, Qatar held the world
Soccer cup, wasn't it?
No. summer games, you know, or sort of like the Asian kind of games. But Qatar held a world winter games type of thing. But it was for summer sports because you know even in the winter in Qatar, it's still pretty mild. So you know I got one of their cards too. Next slide, Sammy.
But of course, you know, a couple hundred miles away, they have a few,
Yeah.
they have a couple of indoor skiing.
Right. So this wasn't so much meant to be about Qatar, but that's where my brief sort of came from. Qatar, you know, the population was at that time a couple of years ago was about 600,000. It's about 700,000 now. If you look, only about a third of the people are citizens. The rest are not. And the people that are not are either treated real bad or real well. But there's not much in between. You know, the guys that do the labor, they're treated pretty poor. You know, 20 people in a house kind of thing. The guys that have come over, like the U.S. people come over for petroleum and stuff, you know, engineers, they get treated real well. And I found out later that the average Qatari citizen gets about $50,000 worth of money every year just from the government, from the oil benefits. They also get a chunk of land that to call their own. And what they'll do is they incorporate that with their friends or with their relatives to get a bigger chunk. And I did make one short trip up into Iraq while I was there. Next slide, sorry. So what I did was I took the software and it will pop every country you talk to. So there's a little red dot for every country I talk to. At least at one point in time. I don't think this included my very last trip. But if you see, you know, I was here, easy to work Europe. You know, Africa was not that tough, but the problem is Africa doesn't have a lot of ham radio guys. You know, I worked the east coast of South America. You know, worked the Pacific area in here. You know, got Cambodia. I think I got Vietnam too. I think those are overlapping. You know, got South Korea. North Korea doesn't have any ham radio guys. Australia. I don't think it shows, but then you got New Zealand. And you know, all over the place. And that's with this antenna and a max of 100 watts on CW, 30 watts on PSK. Wow. Next. But what happens is on the radio, when you're from a rare country, and Qatar has like about 50 or 60 amateur radio operators, sort of rare. If you get on the radio, people listen for you. So there's what they call spotting networks, another thing with the radio, with the computers. Somebody will see you and they'll say, hey, this country is on this frequency right now. And that gets sent out by the internet and everybody looks at that. And it's, you know, I mean, I used to be able to time it. It's like I'm going to get on the radio for about 10 minutes. And then when the pilot goes, it's like I'm going to have to leave kind of thing. I used to do that sometimes, but I would get on there and I'll work like 3 hours without even realizing what's going on. You know, like CW, you know, and when you do that, you're only sending the call sign from signal report and say bye.
They have flash dot effect.
Yeah. So that was kind of fun. There's some pictures from Qatar when I was there. This was in my little room. You know, kind of give you show you what I did. I had to put my stuff up every night. You know, or every time I was done, I had to take it out. That's why it was handy to have this antenna with the magnetic base. I would go outside, stick my antenna up, you know, reach up as high as I could, stick it on top of the AC unit of the trailers that I lived in. Or when I was in the tent, I would go stick it on top of the AC unit of the tent that was outside. You know, so that's not a good thing for RF because it makes a lot of noise. But you know, like I said, we kind of had some fun there. So next slide, Sam.
That's the last one.
Is it? Did I have any more? Or did I talk too fast?
I think we had a few other pictures.
No, they're all the same.
No, actually, we do, I believe, have a couple of non-used pictures.
Let's see if we can hear anything on the radio now.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I think it's mostly because the buildings, you know, has a lot of metal, you know, and time of day kind of thing. We're not hearing any signals. I mean, I checked before you guys all got here. I checked 40 meters, 20, there was a signal, you would see a brighter track, and it would only be about as wide as what
Looks
these
like
two
there may
red
be a
marks
very, very
are.
faint one.
There may be a faint one there.
That you have to manually tune.
Not with the, once you set the radio, that's the audio passband of the radio from about 500 hertz to about 2500, which is a
Oh, okay.
little short. It's really, I think the radio's set for 2.2 right now, because if you could close down that passband, then it's easier to focus on what you're trying to listen to. Plus, it's hard to decode the stuff on either end of the passband.
And do we need to tune the antenna? I changed to
Oh,
frequency.
it won't, that, you're on 80 meters, the antenna won't tune at all. You go to 70707. And let's go ahead and tune the radio. This antenna has a little motor in it that will raise and lower the antenna. Well, there's a coil in there, and a coil is like adding length to the antenna. The antenna needs to be harmonically related to the frequency that you're talking on. Basically, so if we're on 40 meters, the antenna needs to be about a quarter of that length, so the antenna needs to be about 10 meters long. Let's see, we're getting there. Yeah, it's not really putting out any power right now because the SWR won't turn off. Yeah, turn off. It's not, there's too much stuff to detune the antenna in here right now. So, it won't go. I mean, if there was a signal, we might hear it, but we wouldn't be able to turn it on this frequency right now.
Can we do CW on here?
You could try, but I don't, you could just turn it CW on.
Well, I mean, we could at least translate their
We're gonna get down to where CW is taking place. You just, sorry. See, he's trying to tune the radio and I'm
I
trying
didn't
to tune
mean
it.
to tune it that time. Where do you want it? Like,
I'm doing it. Okay, go to 14.
14?
Yeah.
Where?
25. That's 17, 18. I'll get the 25 part. There's just too much noise. That's just radio noise, that tone. So unfortunately, we don't have really anything to show you on the radio. We were hoping to. Sam and I set this up out in our garage this weekend, and we were able to listen to Australia, or not Australia, Argentina and Brazil, and a couple of countries in the Caribbean.
And a few weeks ago, we were able to hear people from Idaho.
Yeah, we were hearing people in Idaho just a couple weeks ago when we had it all set up. Put it on a table in our garage, set this outside in the driveway, but no luck. No luck today, at least.
Do you have roof access?
What's that?
No.
Yeah, my cable's not long enough, sorry.
Yes, I do. The back parking deck would probably be just as good.
Yeah, it would. You know, we could hook the
I
magnet,
have-
hook the magnet to the rail on that, and it'd probably pick up a little better too.
I also have my 12-volt DC inverter.
That's what that is. Oh, I'm thinking just AC, it's the same kind of power supply. I'll tell you a little bit about the radio. This radio's been made since about 2003. Yaesu, the Japanese company, they brought it out. It was originally like one of the first small compact HF radios. So this particular radio will cover for the ham bands 1.8 through the 28 megahertz ham band. So that's 80 or 160 meters through 10 meters. It'll cover the 6 meter ham band, for that, you know, for using especially from your house. The used ones are going from about $200 on that. So it's not that bad. You know, before I went to Cutter, I bought an Icon. I think it was like an Icon 720 model, HF and 2-meter radio, and I sold it when I got back from Cutter. But that one was $200 when I bought it. I took it down to Texas because I had to go to school for 7 weeks. Took it down there, worked fine. You know, it's just like when I got to Cutter, it's like a really small radio because I didn't know how much space I was going to have. And when I first got there, I was living in a tent in a cubicle about the size of this space here, just a little longer than a bed, kind of thing. So it was handy to have that little tiny thing. And even in that space, I had my radio set up because, like I said, I put it up in the morning or put it up when I'm done. Put the radio on a box and played with that. You know, then I sat on my bed or whatever, typed up the computer kind of thing. But the licenses start out with they call it a novice license, and there's like a 30-question test.
Yeah, they got rid of novice, remember?
Oh, sorry, you're right. Technician license. It's like a 30-question test, and with that you're tested on radio theory, basic radio theory, and then at that level it's pretty simple. Rules and regulations and some operating procedures. It's not that tough. I mean, the pass rate on the tech license is pretty high, and you can get the question pools online. So if you want to study to take the test. And in the Omaha area, there's a couple radio clubs that offer tests about once a month. So
And there are several free study guides available
Yeah,
with CDF
free
online.
study guides, that kind of
Just
stuff.
Just that kind of thing.
And
So you don't have to go spend money on books or
no.
the question pool's so small you can print it memorize.
Yeah, for the
novice,
it's
amateur
usually-
extra, I did end up taking that twice.
Yeah, it's usually 10 to 1. So I think the question pool for the tech is like 300 questions,
Yeah.
something like that. You know, and you could read through them all, and by the time you're done with them, you would have an idea what's going on. You know, and the answers would jump out at you because the question pool includes the answers. So it's not that hard. You know.
There's software. This software will make
There's
flash
there's
memory
software that does all that. There's
If you
software
have-
online that'll do randomize the pools and give you a 30-question test. You take that, take another one. Once you think you get to the point that hey, I'm passing them every time, go take the test.
There's an Android app for it. It's like 99 cents for free or something.
You need
to study
70%
for all
pass?
free. What?
What, 70% to pass, isn't it?
I
like
think it's
90
higher,
or
but
something.
I'm not sure. I mean, it's still pretty high. In the next up from technician, that gives you some limited privileges, but you're allowed to get on. I think it's 6 meters, 2 meters, and basically anything from 6 on up, which is the VHF frequencies. So if you want to talk to the local guys on the repeaters and stuff, then you can do that with the technician license. Technician also gives you some limited privileges on HF. That's mainly for CW, so not too many guys want to do that, but there's not a requirement for a CW test anymore. And then I think you also, technician has voice privileges on the 10-meter band. So that one,
Do you
when
want me
the
to bring up
sunspot
that chart
cycle,
again?
when the sunspot cycle is good, like right now it's generally good. This is a problem, but when the sunspot cycle is at a peak, 10 meters, well, you can work across the world, with 10 watts. So it's and a 10-meter antenna is relatively compact. This thing fully extended would be about the size of a normal 10-meter antenna. It's only what 2.5 meters long. So a quarter of that wavelength. So the next step from tech is general. That's another. I'm not sure how many questions for that one. But you have to have passed the tech question pool to get the general class license, and it's probably another 30 questions, but I'm not sure. And that's a little more into radio theory, a little more into rules and regulations, a
Because
little
you
more
have
into
more responsibility.
a little more into operating procedures. And then with the general license, you get all the HF bands. It's just that there's a few slivers on the HF bands that the general class licenses cannot use, and those are reserved for the extra class licenses. most of it's Morse code. There's some sideband stuff that's limited to for general, but I think it's been minimized, in the last few years. And then the last license is an extra class license. I think that's like a 50 test question pool, and they would say advanced radio theory, advanced rules, regulations, that kind of stuff. But if you took the other two, passed those, you're gonna be able to take the extra. You're just gonna have to study a little bit longer, partly because the pool's bigger, and it might take a little bit of time for the questions to click into the why part. Why are things this way?
Just a little bit more obscure question.
Yep. Because they're going to ask about impedance, and the what's the letter J? The negative square root of 1 kind of thing, and it's like that's hard to wrap your mind around, kind of thing, But when I took my extra class test 25 years ago, it's like I know that I'm never going to understand these parts of the question pool. I'm not even going to worry about it. Still pass. So
Just memorize the answers.
yeah, you could do that. Memorize the answers, and you're just like, I'm not going to worry about this. You still, you got to get 70% or better to pass.
So it sounds like it's more of the math stuff in there.
There's a little more math, and it depends on which, who generated the test, onto whether there's block diagrams and stuff. I think they've been trying to get away from those. Some of the people that administer the test, because it'll show you a block diagram of a receiver with like a preamp, an antenna and some other stuff, and it'll say what is this, what part is this, kind of thing, So, but like we said, the question pool's online, picture diagrams are out there, so it's not hard if you try. Not everybody passes out on the first time, definitely.
No.
Not
everyone.
No. And the way the tests work is you go
You can
to.
roll 3 at one time.
What's that?
You can get an exam fee one time. If you know all of it, you can take.
You can, yeah.
Three
I'm going to get to that.
$15 or whatever it is.
Yep. The way the tests work is you go to a volunteer examining coordinator or examining team, and basically they don't get paid, and they give the test. Well, in the Omaha metro area, they have them at least once a month. The team of guys go, they're volunteers, go, they sit there, they generate the test, or they get the test from the ARL. They're all printed out, you answer the questions, they grade it. And if you start from nothing, and if you pass the tech license, you can continue on to take the general, even if you might not have studied. Maybe you picked up enough from studying the tech that you can pass the general. If you pass that one, then you can go on to take the extra. As soon as you fail, you have to pay another fee, and the fee's like $15 to take the test. Some of the examining teams will let you retake that test you failed in that session. Some of them won't, just depends. So, it's like I've done a few tests in the area, and those guys, you pass, it's like you might as well take it. It's only cost you time. Then you know what that test is going to be like. So give you an idea of what happened to make the test that time. So it's fun. I got into ham radio in like 1982, something like that, and I had quite the station back then for being 20 years old. I had my radio worked only the ham bands and HF. Had 2 tubes for the finals. The rest of the radio was solid state, but the radio was this big. Was not mobile at all. But I also had an amplifier that was about that big, 1,000 watts, because ham radio you're allowed to go up to 1,500 watts in general. Some bands there's limitations. 1,000 watts of power. I had a beam antenna, rotator, so I could push my antenna, point my signal where I wanted. And I lived in Wyoming, which for the U.S. was one of the rarer states. So I would get on the radio, and back then I would talk to Russians, whenever I wanted, because it was like, we want to talk to you. And then it was the Soviet Union, but they get on the radio. It's like, oh, please QSL, and back then they used to say Box 88, because that was the Russian QSL bureau. send their card to this bureau. They would send basically stamped self-addressed envelopes to the bureau. And when there was enough cards to fill their envelope, the bureau would fill it and send it to them. Well, the bureau still exists. And like for here, the bureau I think is in Omaha, but I'm not positive. Yeah, I think it's like there's some DX group. Maybe, but I was in Wyoming. My call sign had a 7, so our bureau was in Oregon. So I used to send my envelopes to them, and about twice a year you get those. It's like, all right, get confirmed. Well, they still do that. People still want cards, and that doesn't cost you hardly anything, because you send it to outbound, you send it to the ARL, they send it to all the sister bureaus, and then they get distributed from there. And the same thing works. The ARL receives them for the U.S., sends them to the call sign area bureaus, and then they distribute it to people who have their envelopes on file. Or you can do it the electronic way, which is what everybody's going to. But some people still like the paper copy.
Which is a lot faster.
What else, other than like speaking with other people, what else can you do with
Well,
ham radio?
Aren't you allowed to do radio control and telemetric?
yeah.
Or is that kind of a broad question?
Well, you're going to be talking to people. You're not allowed to do broadcast one-way transmissions in general. I mean, there's some exceptions.
Emergency.
For call them like swap shops or whatever. There's some exceptions to the one-way broadcast. But you're generally supposed to be talking to people. And part of the original intent on radio was to develop a trained pool of operators who could help in an emergency. And when we had, several years ago, when the hurricane took out New Orleans, the ham radio guys were there. They had stuff set up before the rest of the infrastructure could get in. And they were sending messages back and forth using packet radio signals, which is sort of like TCP/IP stacks. Sort of doing the same
Just
thing,
not
but using
advanced.
the radio as the medium instead of the copper wire or optical cable or whatever. And then ham radio also has satellites, so you can send your signal up to the satellite, and get it back down, and you can listen to yourself because there's a transit time, But you can do that. They have one communication mode. They call it Earth, Moon, Earth. You can send your signal to the moon, and it'll bounce back to you on the U.S. Usually done with like 2 meters and 70 centimeters and other VHF, UHF bands. And you try to talk to other people. That's a more structured thing, because generally you have to know to listen, or else the signal's going to be so down in the weeds that you might not hear it.
Yeah.
But with the advent of digital stuff and using that DSP on your computers, it's made Earth and Earth contacts a lot easier.
So you kind of have to like bounce it off at the right time. And you don't
Yeah.
have much time to talk to somebody.
Usually the contacts are short, and you're not actually. It's going to be digital modes, so you're going to send either Morse code or PSK type transmissions, and generally you're only going to be sending for EME. You're only going to be sending your call sign, signal report, and your location. It's not really a mode to talk. But HF, if you want to talk to people, you get on there and you can talk to people all over the world, kind of thing. So in VHF, the repeaters, around here we have lots of 2 meter and 70 centimeter repeaters. You get on there and talk to the local guys, out to about 40 or 50 miles away from the repeater. And they have radio clubs that promote the radio, and help new people to learn on operating procedures, that kind of thing.
That's where his presentation came from.
Which one'd you do, for the Bellevue or the Exarban one?
I did it for Bellevue, and there's also a DX club. I forget the name of it. I did briefing for them at one time. You guys have any more questions? I don't know if I have anything more to talk about.
I can talk about software still.
You could talk about software.
I can talk about it a little more. Fliggy is.
Oh, which band?
Yeah. The FCC will stop you
Yeah,
eventually.
you'll get caught if
Yeah.
you transmit out of band, or you may get caught. You know,
Which they probably get.
the amateur radio as a group is a pretty good self-policing organization.
So there's nothing to stop you on the radio.
No.
Well, some are. Some have firmware.
This radio, the firmware, is set to not allow you to transmit too far out of the bands that you're supposed to. But its receiver will go from like 500 kilohertz, so that's the AM, broadcast band, up to 450 megahertz. Basically, there's a few chunks that are blocked out, but you can listen anywhere in there. You just can't transmit.
Right. You can listen to anything. You just
If
what
your
you can
radio,
transmit on.
yeah, if your radio will tune it and you can decode it, you can listen to it. On the transmit side, it's a firmware thing, but like this radio, it's been modded so that I can transmit out of the bands. Because when I was in Qatar, I was a Mars operator. It's a military affiliate radio system. It's sort of like the amateur radio for the military guys. They do health and welfare messages, that kind of stuff. So there's a real simple mod to the radio to let you transmit outside of the bands. So if I accidentally right now made an excursion outside of the bands, I could transmit there, but I'm not supposed to.
But the band's also vary from country to country. So if you buy a
Yep.
radio like a Biofang on Amazon, you might be able to talk to bands you shouldn't be able to talk to.
Yep.
It's always your responsibility as an amateur radio. That's one of the questions you'll always get asked about responsibility of making sure you're complying with the code and all that stuff.
Okay, well, let's see what we can talk about the software.
We don't have to go on too much more.
Fliggy is kind of a large piece of software. I mean, it was mostly written in C, but there are some elements actually written in Perl. So, I mean, I like that, but a lot of people I know people who aren't big fans of Perl. But it's got its logbook.
Can you bring up the radio thing that shows it looks like a radio?
Yeah, that was great. It's got a logbook. It outputs one of the big formats, ADIF, amateur data interchange format. I mean, I've looked at the specification. I figured it would be something similar to, I don't know, a CSV with a specific field order. It's not.
It is.
It's not CSV. It doesn't.
Yeah, but it's similar.
It doesn't require a field order either.
Yeah. All right.
It is new line separated, I believe.
Well, flip it over to the radio monitor.
Yeah.
You guys can't see what's on the radio, but the monitor sort of lets you see what happens. And this radio, because it's small and the screen's so small, a lot of the functions are in menus. So unfortunately, I haven't used this radio for a long time, so I sort of forget all the menu settings. It's like, where do I need to be? When we got here, I found out that it's like, oh, this is not good. I was set for 5 watts max output. It's like, oh well, nobody's gonna hear me if that happens. So I bumped it up to 30 or to 100 after we put the fluorescent tube away. So either way, but it's all menus, so that means it's all computer driven really, and most of that stuff will be controlled off your computer. So if you're on like PSK, you don't even have to have the audio on. You just turn the radio on, and you can see the signal, see the tracks. That's shown on the frequency center.
Yeah, because for some reason it's on the dummy radio. Is it on?
Yeah. You gotta push hold for a second.
Of
I
all
think it's
things.
operator error.
No.
So either way, you can bring that back because it shows you the signal.
Oh well.
I mean, that would be an example.
Yeah.
If he doesn't have it talking to the radio right now. But you can do different things. Like here, it's showing AB, split, and you can move frequencies around. You can work off of memories, so you do that. You work splits when you don't want people that are talking to you to interfere with you. So when you're working DX, distance, you know, the countries that are way out there kind of thing. You might want to be on the one on wherever you're transmitting, you know, let's say like 14050, and you receive, you'll tell them when you're transmitting, you'll say up 3 or up 5. So they'll go up 3 kilohertz or up 5 kilohertz, and they'll transmit up there. That way, they're not interfering with you, because like when I was in Qatar, you get these pile-ups or a whole lot of people trying to get you. If they're on top of you, then you don't know what's going on. Nobody hears you coming back to the guy that you were responding to.
So you have two ways to.
They're slightly different frequencies. You know,
So you have a full conversation.
well,
Pretty easy.
not, you can't it's all simplex.
Oh, okay.
But when you say over, or on Morse code it would be K or KN, when you say over, the other guys start transmitting. Well, if they don't know that you're back on because you picked out a signal, they'll just keep transmitting and nobody else will hear you. So you work splits to avoid that problem. So you transmit on one frequency and listen on a slightly different frequency. You know, and it's just so that you can have that offset so that the other people aren't basically talking on top of you. But it all kind of works out. You know, that's the splits. Here it shows FM narrow, but you know, you can swap the mode, and you can do the mode either on the radio or the computer.
In this
Kind
case,
of
you
thing.
can't do it.
The F units is a signal level. It's sort of an arbitrary thing. And you know, a few other things. Then there's probably settings on the software.
G-Rig, it just does at debug level.
Okay.
But Hamlib it's kind of the way Cat on Linux is done. I mean, there are other things. Fliggy has its own backend. Is it changing on there?
Yep. On the radio.
Okay. Fliggy has its own system, has its own rig control system. But Hamlib is kind of the big one. Hamlib has bindings for like 4 or 5 different languages: C, C++, Perl, and Python. Which is kind of nice. I mean, it allows you to do memory mapping is mostly just so you can have multiple programs running to do controls. Same with XMLRPC. And then, like I said, Fliggy has their own thing. It's RigCat, and it uses a rig specification file written in XML, which is kind of unpleasant. And then, of course, it has their controls for PTT. But with Hamlib, the one thing about Hamlib is when I was setting Grig up, or trying to run Grig, with Grig, with Hamlib, you can't just say, I want this radio and give a radio name. You have to say, I want this radio, and you have to give a Hamlib identification number, which tells Hamlib, okay, we're going to send these commands on these pins. Which, in ways, is a bit annoying, but it's how Hamlib does it.
That's enough said. It is.
Okay.
We got to get it going.
Yeah, I guess, well, I mean, it's only 7.
Yeah, we got to get going. Section 740.
Oh,
Your
well.
clock is wrong, son.
I don't use this.
Do we have any more questions? We probably, Sam and I and our guests probably need to be going pretty soon.
This was cool, guys.
Yeah.
It's,
This was interesting.
you know, for some people, it's a lifelong hobby. A lot of people get into it when they retire. The sort of the cost of entry, sort of what you want to make of it. If you want to get into mainly VHF stuff, you can get used radios for $50 on a, brand new VHF radios, 2-meter radios. You can get handhelds for $100 or so, 100 and a quarter. You can get mobile radios, which are significantly smaller than this, one, you know, even though it originally came out in about 2003, something like that, it's still one of the smallest HF radios out there. And then, you know, they've upgraded it a couple times. They've added additional digital signal processing stuff in it. And I think, like I said earlier, it's about $700-800, something like that. And then you have to have antennas. You know, you can make an antenna that costs you practically nothing, or you can buy an antenna. You know, this one was, I bought it used for about $100. You know, but you can get other HF antennas for, you know, $50 on up. You can make HF. The nice thing about that is because the links are kind of long, you can use pieces of wire. You know, they make a called dipole antenna, 2 pieces of wire. You know, and with some wire, you know, if you got extra house wiring laying around, you can strip that stuff off. You can even leave the insulation on. That part doesn't matter. Hook that up to your coax cable, and there's an antenna. It's got to be tuned to about the right frequency, or you can use a tuner. This radio does not have a tuner built in, but a lot of new ones do. You know, where you get external tuners, you know, do that for you. And you know, again, cost of entry for those is, you know, $50 to whatever you want to spend. If you want to get into DX, you might want to get a tower and a beam. A lot more expensive that way. But I think you saw, you know, even with this antenna, we still work halfway around the world. You know, because if you listen close, you can, you know, you can pick out the weak signals. And with this antenna, you're going to be weak, so they have to be listening to you. You know, and if you're in the U.S. on DX, you know, stuff, they might not hear you, but if you listen, you know, and catch a guy as he's just coming on and nobody else has pounced on him yet, he might be the first guy to work him. You know, and there's people in this country, you know, all over the world too, that'll work 5 watts. They call that QRP, which is very low power. They'll work 5 watts. You know, they work. You know,
That's their challenge. That's what they like.
yeah, that's their challenge. You know, the receiver's still high. You know, it's still a good receiver. They limit themselves on purpose to 5 watts. I can turn this radio down to 5 watts if I want, but I could also turn it, you know, 1 watt steps up to 100. So I mean, it all sort of depends on you. Then you hook an amplifier up to it and do 1500 watts.
You can also make your own receiver too.
Yep.
A little transmitter. That's one of the things a lot of people are doing right now is the Altoids tin, just a simple CW one, just to try and get halfway around the world on them.
Yeah.
Let on a couple of watts.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff on Instructables that you can do without plates.
Oh, yeah.
Good for you. And
There's
of course,
a couple guys that make little kits, you know, that you know, basically now a radio is a chip. You know, it's not a lot of stuff. It used to be a big giant coil, sort of like the coil here, and a big giant inductor, you know, or a capacitor rather, you know, and a signal source or something to excite the signal, an amplifier for that, you know, etc. And people used to build those, you know, people still build that kind of stuff to some extent, but you know, you can also get the radio on a chip, hook up the few external components, and do all the other stuff. Cool.
Have you, either of you worked with, just real quick, GNU radio?
Stop the trips. What'd you say?
Have either of you worked with like GNU radio at all?
that's software-defined radio.
He
I don't
he
even.
wants to play with that.
I don't even have a license, so. No,
I
I
thought
want to
about
get
it,
one.
but,
I just haven't
you
taken
know,
the time.
Oh, you do?
What? I've done it.
Oh.
He did a presentation last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was.
I was using the really cheap nominal version, just to stuff.
Yeah, there was recently, I think it was featured on Hackaday, a $120 dollar, basically ham compatible SDR, and it's
Yeah, I think
entirely open hardware too.
The,
So.
that stuff is, you know, for the radio side of things, is still open and wide open anyway. There's stuff going on all the time, you know. And you'll come across, you know, I can't show you because it's just not working. But you'll come across signals and wonder, what the hell is that? You know, and if you have something like the software-defined radio where you can go in there and mess with the settings, maybe you can decode it because you can tell that there's some kind of intelligence in there, that there's some changing of the frequency just a little bit, you know, by ear, which, you know, obviously you can't make it out, just, you know, digital signal, you can't really make that out, you know. So with the software-defined radio or other software, you know, with digital signal processing, maybe you can pick that out, you know. It all just depends what you want to do.
So, with ham radio bands are not the same as like radio bands.
Let me come a little closer.
Well, radio is anything that's above physical spectrum pretty much.
There were
old
the
time
cleaning
days,
people were
you know,
out there
not that
a lot
old,
of
this was 20,
back
30
in
years
the
ago, used to be shortwave radio, and there's still shortwave radio. If you get on there, you can listen to like Voice of America. You see
Soccer
radio.
games.
It used to
All
be radio.
this football.
Yeah, it used to be Radio Moscow. Israel used to have a transmission. You know, and they pointed their radio signal all over the world. You know, so you can still pick that stuff up. You know, and there's ham bands interspersed between all this stuff. And for the analog to FM radio, you know, like on your car, ham radio has a band at 50 megahertz, which is about half of what your FM radio is, because it's like 88 to 108. And then they have a band at 144 to 148 megahertz. So we have bands on both sides of that. And they do similar things, you know. If you think about it, you're driving your car and you have it on an FM station, signal peters out after about 50 or 60 miles from town. The same thing with the ham radio in those frequency ranges. You know, same kind of, they call it propagation. You know, and ham radio, we have what we call repeaters. You know, that's a radio you transmit on one frequency, you know, sends it out on a different one. It's still simplex, but people aren't listening to your input frequency, they're listening to your output frequency. And typically that repeater's on a tall building or a mountain with the antenna that's way up there, and it's using a lot more power than you are. So it can get out, you know, to the horizon kind of thing, and a little beyond. You know, and then on HF, you know, that's where the long distance stuff is. There's some long distance otherwise in the VHF, but the HF, that's where you talk around.
That is
High frequency. You know, they call high frequency from 3 to 30. 3 megahertz to 30 megahertz. And then VHF, I think, is 30 megahertz to 300. And then UHF is 300 to 3,000. Something like that. And, you know, so they're in decades. You know, multiples of 10. Yeah, multiples of 10. Something like that. You know?
So, and then going through studying for that test, you'll pick all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
You know, to learn the bands, one of the easiest ways is to look at that, like that chart that I showed.
Right.
And then if you look at them and start looking at the frequencies, you'll start to see that they're related. You know, usually the next one is twice the one before it, kind of thing. It doesn't apply 100% because there's been new bands added since the original band plan took effect.
FCC played around
Yep.
with it.
And what's it, the International Amateur Radio Commission, or I forget what it is. You know, world, you know, there's a governing body for everything. There's a governing body for radio, commercial, business, you know, business, commercial, military, you know, government. There's a governing body at the international level for that. And they assign frequencies, you know. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they gave us new frequencies.
And they're going for the rest of the frequencies.
Yeah, and that's a problem, you know, everybody's looking for chunks of RF now, you know, so they've slowly taken a few from the amateur radio guys here and there.
Yeah, well, the amateur radio guys don't have as good a lobby as
Because
Sprint.
it's all,
It's all money.
you know, there's not really much money involved in the amateur radio side of things, except for the production of the equipment, you know, and those guys, the guys that sell that stuff don't even make that much money on it.
I mean, there's a lot of research in that area. though.
Get stuff packed up,
All
Sam.
these other things like there's slow band television broadcasts and all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah, just-
You can do all sorts of weird experiments in amateur radio stuff. As long as you don't interfere with other stuff, you're well defined, not broadcasting music, you're not doing code, you can pretty much do whatever you want with bands.
Like transmitting encryption.
Encryption, you're not allowed to do encryption.
Right.
You can do
Non-commercial.
Yeah, non-commercial stuff, you know. But, you know, some would say that, you know, a digital signal is an encoded signal. Well, all you gotta do is have the software to have that, you know.
Yeah.
So nobody's gonna listen to that with their ear to decode it, but you just
Except
hook
for
it up.
CW,
Yeah,
which
except
is
for
digital.
You know, except you hook your radio up to it and you can do that. And there's some exceptions for using encoded, you know, or encrypted transmissions, but you basically, key has to be publicly available kind of thing, and you have to request permission. You know, why bother, you know? And you're not supposed to be doing business on it, so there's no reason to do that.
Where's the Allen key?
I think it's in my pocket.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in my pocket, sorry.
Well,
Could
thanks
I
for
say
speaking,
something?
guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'd like to, I had not planned on saying anything when I came down here, but, I'm interested in Linux. That's why I came here, because, well, I've been using it for a long time. So I planned on coming anyway. So I told someone about it, and he asked me to pass on a message. He said he's looking for a programmer. He wants to develop a prototype of a product. The product is, will run, the prototype will run on a tablet, and it would be tethered to something like a desktop machine, a laptop or a bigger machine. The idea is that it would have, it would be tethered either with USB maybe or even Wi-Fi. But the idea is that it would display the menus of the window currently in focus as a grid, or with little icons, maybe an adjustable grid size.
There, if he's using Mac or Windows and he has an iPad.
Sam, let him finish.
Sorry.
So what he's looking for is a programmer to actually help him develop the prototype. So if anyone wants to get involved, or if they know of someone who might want to get involved, this is my email address.
The red one's probably
This one, all right.
fuller there.
So you can send me an email and I'll pass it on. That's it. That's all.
It's an interesting
There is
problem
something
to try
for
to solve that.
if you
Yeah,
have
but
an
the problem is actually finding out the focus. You probably have to have something on the desktop, I would think.
yeah. What
To pass on the focus of,
what desktop operating system is he looking
well, you know,
for?
it's gonna be Windows, crap.
Okay, there actually is already something to do that. If you're using, if you have an iPad, it doesn't support Android, but it
So
does
anyway, that's the
support-
idea. So if anyone's interested in working or knows of someone who wants to work on that. all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Actions, I believe is what it's called.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that information.
Yep.
Okay. Let's give them. Thank you, guys. Our normal things will be downstairs, so thank you.